Priya's phone buzzes at 9:14 the next morning. She already knows what it is before she looks. A Venmo request from the group chat, $42, memo line just says dinner. She ordered a salad and 1 glass of wine. Somebody else at that table had 2 cocktails, the ribeye and a dessert they didn't even finish. The bill got split evenly 8 ways anyway, because someone said let's just make it easy before the check even landed. And nobody, including Priya, said a word. She pays it. Of course she pays it. Here's the part nobody says out loud in the group chat. Let's just split it evenly isn't about fairness. It's about making sure nobody has to feel awkward for 30 seconds, and you are the one quietly footing the bill for that comfort, dinner after dinner, for years. This isn't a video telling you to stop going out with your friends. It's a video about a trap, one so well disguised that we've started calling it easygoing. Let me show you the math. My name is Alex, and I spend a genuinely unreasonable amount of time looking at where people's money quietly vanishes to. If you've ever stared at a Venmo request that didn't match what you actually ordered and paid it anyway because pushing back felt worse than the money, hit subscribe, because today on Wealth Adjacent we're taking apart the most normalized overspending in your social life, the group chat. Before we go further, a quick disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. This isn't financial advice. And I am absolutely not telling anyone to stop splitting bills with friends or start bringing a calculator to brunch. Friendship is genuinely worth paying for. What I am here to do is run the actual numbers on a category of spending that never shows up as one big scary charge, so it never gets questioned. It just quietly leaks out of your account in $12, $20, $40 increments forever. Let's introduce someone. Priya, late 20s, marketing coordinator, part of a friend group that's had the same group chat since college. Self-named the usual suspects. They're not reckless people. They've got jobs. They've got rent. Most of them have a savings account they actually check. And every single week, in ways that never feel like a decision, that group chat quietly moves money out of Priya's account that she never fully agreed to spend. Let's start with the number, because it is genuinely a little unhinged. Multiple recent surveys on group spending among adults in their 20s and 30s put the average person's annual spend on group activities, dinners, trips, gifts, shared subscriptions, somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a year, a meaningful chunk of which they later admit they wouldn't have spent if they'd been deciding alone. Let me say that again. Thousands of dollars a year, driven not by what people actually wanted to buy, but by what felt too socially awkward to say no to in the moment. Where does that money actually go? A large share to dinners and drinks, split evenly regardless of what each person ordered. Another meaningful chunk to group trips, the ones that start as "we should all get an Airbnb sometime" and end with a $500 Venmo request 3 weeks later. Then there's the shared subscriptions, the streaming account split 6 ways where 2 people stopped using it a year ago but never left. The group chat asking for their $4. And the rest disappears into gift pools, bachelorette contributions, and the birthday dinner, where somehow the birthday person's meal gets folded into everyone else's bill too, as a surprise nobody actually agreed to fund. And here's the part that should make you sit up. It's getting worse, not better. Digital payment apps have made this dramatically frictionless. A request that used to require someone awkwardly doing mental math with a pen and a napkin now takes 4 taps and auto-calculates an even split by default, meaning the app itself has quietly made even split the path of least resistance, whether or not it's actually fair. Nobody comparison shops a group dinner bill the way they comparison shop a plane ticket. But awkward isn't the trap. Awkward is just awkward. Here's where it becomes a trap. A significant share of people report regularly paying more than their fair share in group settings specifically because they didn't want to be the person who brought it up. And the genuinely uncomfortable stat sitting right next to it. A notable share of people say they've skipped ordering something they wanted or ordered less, specifically anticipating an even split, and then got charged the even split anyway because someone else ordered more regardless. Read that twice. People are quietly punishing themselves twice, once by ordering less, and again by paying for what everyone else ordered more of. Back to Priya. Over the course of a single year, Between the weekly dinners, one group trip to a lake house, a bachelorette contribution for a friend getting married, and her share of a streaming subscription, 3 of the 6 people stopped using, Priya's actual group chat spending lands around $2,600. Not one dinner, not one trip, the whole quiet accumulation of a year of never being the one who says something. She didn't sit down and decide to spend that. It arrived in Venmo notifications, one polite, unquestioned request at a time. She is not the exception. Most people in recurring friend groups report that group costs regularly exceed what they'd have chosen to spend on their own, and the overwhelming majority say they've paid a request without checking it against what they actually ordered, because checking felt like an accusation instead of a question. Now here's the part that turns this from a spending problem into a psychology problem. And this is the part that should genuinely annoy you once you see it clearly. Humans are, deeply and reliably, conflict-averse in small, social groups, especially groups built on years of shared history. That's not a character flaw. That's basic social wiring. We're built to protect the relationship over protecting the $4. And let's just split it evenly has become a socially sanctioned script that exploits exactly that wiring. It sounds generous. It sounds low maintenance. It is specifically the phrase that makes anyone who disagrees sound petty by comparison. Nobody wants to be the person doing math at the table while everyone else is laughing about something from 10 years ago. A behavioral economist studying group payment norms found something almost too honest. Even splitting isn't actually perceived as fair. Most people know it isn't. They simply rate the social cost of pointing that out as higher than the financial cost of absorbing it. You didn't agree that a $42 bill was fair. You agreed that saying so wasn't worth what it would cost socially in that exact moment. And then there's the app itself. A large share of people say they've sent or received a Venmo or Zelle request without fully checking the math behind it, specifically because the request arrived framed as a fait accompli, a menner, a memo, a you owe, rather than an open question. Nobody would hand a stranger cash without checking the amount. But a request from a close friend, wrapped in the shorthand of an app you use 50 times a month? That's not scrutiny, that's rudeness. The app didn't just move money, it moved the presumption of correctness along with it. There's a specific design quirk worth naming here too. Most payment apps round the even split to a clean, friendly-looking number before anyone's even had a chance to think about it, and clean round numbers carry a kind of social authority that itemized ones don't. A request for exactly $40 feels like a fact. A request for $37.40 feels like a calculation, one that invites scrutiny precisely because it looks like someone actually worked it out. Round numbers get paid faster and questioned less, which is exactly why the even split defaults to 1. Now, before we go further, we still haven't gotten to the single most quietly resented request in every friend group's history, the one everyone has received and nobody has ever pushed back on. Hold that thought, because first, the smaller leaks. Let's talk about the phrase that should trigger alarm bells in any group chat. We'll figure it out later. A trip cost that would get itemized and confirmed in any business setting gets waved off with that exact phrase among friends, and later routinely means one person, usually whoever booked the Airbnb, floating the entire deposit for weeks while everyone else figures it out at their own pace. Group trip organizers routinely report carrying hundreds to low thousands of dollars in unreimbursed group costs at any given time, functioning as an unpaid, unwilling short-term lender to their own friend group. Then there's the shared subscription itself, which sounds like a great deal on paper but functions differently in practice. A streaming or music subscription split 6 ways is genuinely a good price, right up until 2 people stop using it and never mention it, because bringing it up feels like accusing a friend of pettiness over $4 a month. Most split subscription groups report at least one member who stopped using the service entirely but is still being charged, sometimes for over a year, because nobody wants to be the one who asks. And then, the actual most quietly resented request of them all, the group gift contribution that escalates without anyone formally agreeing to the escalation. It starts as, let's all chip in 20 for her birthday gift. And by the Time 3 people have suggested upgrades, it's suddenly $60 per person for a gift nobody individually chose, sized to impress the group rather than the actual recipient. Multiply this across birthdays, weddings, baby showers, and going away parties for a friend group with any tenure, and you've quietly created a recurring, unbudgeted gift tax nobody remembers agreeing to. There's also the resale reality of group trips nobody mentions in the planning chat. The overpriced lake house that seemed reasonable split 8 ways becomes considerably less reasonable when 2 people cancel last minute and the remaining 6 quietly absorb their share. Because asking the 2 who dropped out to pay anyway feels like an escalation nobody wants to be the one to start. This same dynamic tends to land hardest on whoever in the group is the natural organizer, and every friend group seems to have exactly one. That person books the Airbnb on their own card because someone needs to lock in the date, fronts the deposit, and then spends the next month gently nudging 6 different people to Venmo them back, absorbing whatever gap never quite gets settled. Ask any group's designated planner how much unreimbursed money they're currently carrying at any given moment, and the number is rarely 0. They've quietly become an unpaid, unlicensed bank for people who call them a friend. And the job was never applied for, it just accumulated because someone had to do it and they were the one who didn't mind organizing the group chat poll. And then there's the recurring social event economy that's grown up around adult friend groups specifically. Recurring trivia night buy-ins, a rotating dinner club with an unspoken minimum spend, a fantasy football league, fee, a group gift fund for every wedding this decade. Individually small, collectively, a genuinely significant chunk of discretionary income moving through a system nobody consciously designed and nobody feels able to opt out of without seeming like they're pulling away from the friendship itself. All right, here's the section nobody in the group chat wants anywhere near a calculator. Let's do this through Priya because abstract numbers slide right off the brain. Say instead of the full $2,600 a year, Priya had actually only spent on what she chose, roughly $1,400, and put the remaining $1,200 into a simple index fund earning a conservative 8%. Left alone for 20 years, that $1,200 a year becomes roughly $55,000, untouched. No extra contributions beyond that same redirected amount each year. That's not one dinner here and there money. That's meaningfully changes your down payment timeline money. Here's the framework I want you to carry around. Whatever an evenly split bill costs you above what you actually ordered, mentally track it for 1 month. Most people have no idea what the real gap is until they see it in writing. A $12 overpay on a Tuesday dinner isn't a $12 decision. Multiplied across a year of recurring dinners, trips, and subscriptions, it's closer to a genuinely significant annual number, quietly charged to the version of you trying to hit a savings goal that has nothing to do with anyone's ribeye. And now here's where it gets almost cruel. If evenly splitting reliably made friendships stronger, or at least kept things simpler, you could defend the math. It doesn't, particularly. Research on fairness perception in groups settings consistently finds that perceived unfairness, even small, recurring unfairness, quietly erodes relationship satisfaction over time, more than the actual dollar amount would predict. The person who feels taken advantage of doesn't usually say anything. They just start declining invitations, first occasionally, then more often. And the group never quite understands why someone who used to come to everything stopped showing up. The friendship doesn't end over one Venmo request. It erodes slowly, from dozens of them nobody addressed. Now, let me keep my promise, because I am not telling anyone to start itemizing every bill down to the garnish. I can already hear the objections because I get them every time I make a video like this. First, but nitpicking the bill makes you the cheap friend. Nobody wants to be that person. Fair point, and genuinely correct if your solution is auditing every receipt line by line at the table. Nobody's suggesting that. But notice the hidden assumption in that objection, that the only 2 options are silently absorb any gap or become the person doing public math at dinner. That's a false choice most groups have never actually tested another option against. Second, but it's easier to just split it evenly. Doing the math is annoying. Also fair, and modern payment apps have made close enough splitting genuinely simple. Itemized bill splitting features exist in most of them now, and take about the same 4 taps as an even split. The actual answer was never become the difficult friend who tracks every dollar. It's stop treating an unspoken, unfair default as the only polite option available. So here's the framework I'd actually use. I call it the ask once rule, and you can run it on any group cost in under 30 seconds. When a bill, trip cost, or group request comes in, ask the question once, calmly, as information rather than accusation. Should we just itemize this one since the orders were pretty different? Or are we doing even split? Ask it exactly once, at the moment the bill arrives, not after you've already paid and are quietly resentful about it 3 days later. If the group says even split, genuinely fine, that's an actual informed decision rather than an unspoken default, and you can decide from there whether that group's norm works for your budget. If nobody's ever actually asked the question out loud, there's a real chance the entire group has been assuming everyone's fine with something nobody's ever confirmed. A few practical moves fall out of that. Use the itemized split feature in whatever app your group already uses. It exists. It's not extra work. It's just not the default. For recurring group trips, agree on a shared cost tracker before the trip starts, not a vague, we'll settle up later. For split subscriptions, do a quick once-a-year check-in. Is everyone still using this? Which takes 10 seconds and saves the group from quietly funding someone's abandoned account indefinitely. And for gift pools, set the contribution amount once at the start and hold it there, rather than letting 3 enthusiastic suggestions quietly reprice everyone else's contribution. So here's where we land. The group chat trap isn't one bad friend making one selfish request. It's a cultural agreement almost every friend group quietly signs that avoiding 30 seconds of mild awkwardness is worth more than actual fairness, indefinitely, forever, one Venmo request at a time. The data just doesn't support that trade. What it does support is something quieter and far more useful. A friend group that can ask one calm, low-stakes question about a bill without anyone taking it personally tends to actually last longer than one running on unspoken resentment that eventually shows up as someone quietly declining every invitation. And if you're Priya right now, staring at a Venmo request for a number that doesn't match what you ordered, hear this clearly. You're not the difficult friend for noticing the gap. You went up against a genuinely powerful, social script, one built entirely around making disagreement feel more costly than the money itself. Of course, it worked on you for years. It's designed to. Seeing it clearly is most of the battle. So Priya starts asking the question, once, calmly, every time. Some dinners still get split evenly because sometimes that's genuinely fine and easier and nobody minds. Some get itemized in 4 taps because someone had 2 cocktails and someone had tap water. The friendships don't change, the group chat doesn't implode. It's just not quietly financing a year of unexamined spending to keep the peace. Spend on the friendships you actually value. Skip the silent tax that was never actually about friendship at all. And invest the difference because 20 years from now, that difference is a down payment or a much shorter timeline to whatever you're actually saving for. And the next time your phone buzzes with a Venmo request that doesn't quite add up, remember, the awkward 30 seconds of asking about it is a lot shorter than the years of quietly resenting it. If this helped, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's the most unfair Venmo request you've ever silently paid? I'll see you in the next one.